with how things are going, it might be going into November too. But hey. Lost dog, we're really in it now. Howdy, I'm Allie and welcome back to Spooky Spiels, a small series where I talk about an urban fantasy world I've been working on since 2018. You know, I didn't really intend on having this series go past October initially, but yeah, life's been crazy for me. So I had to put this video off until I had more time. Part of the reason this video was delayed so long is because I had to design 2 of these characters completely from scratch. But we're back, and I do intend on talking a little more about the world and some other characters I skimmed over in previous videos. Because this video is dedicated to the final member of the main trio, April. April is a funny one, because while her design and personality have changed the least, her arc is the one I changed the most. I honestly kind of forget all the different directions I wanted to try and take her, and every time I tried to give her a new story, I ended up changing her outfit, and just, there were a lot of weak ideas that I had to sift through before I finally landed on this one. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get into this video, and I'll introduce you to April, the Fire Fairy. April works at a bakery in the small town of Irene, Oregon. She's employed full-time and finally has enough money to move into a house, albeit with some roommates to make the rent cheaper. She's anxious about this though, as she doesn't really know exactly how they'll react to her. She spends the whole day before move-in just worried about it. You see, monsters have only recently been brought into the world's spotlight, and while there are many people who are accepting, there are just as many who aren't. She doesn't want to cause any issues, especially if she's going to be living with these people, so she uses an illusion placed on her headband to make herself appear human. That day, on move-in, she finally meets her new roommates, and they're nice? Weird, definitely, but they don't seem to be bad people. Still, her anxiety gets the better of her, and she decides it's best to keep her identity a secret, just in case. Unfortunately for her, the universe, aka the author, aka me, is conspiring against her. A certain apple dragon gets a little too curious for his own good, and, through a series of mistakes, mishaps, and shenanigans, the headband flies off and April's true form is revealed. But before she can even process that, there's a loud and oh god, Daniel just got impaled, what the fuck? They have to call the cops, oh no! And then Daniel just sits up, like nothing happened. And everyone starts screaming. As you can see from that little snippet, April's a very thoughtful and wary person. Of the 3 main characters, April is the one to carry the common sense. Kat's without a lot of worldly experience, and Daniel, meanwhile, can be reckless as fuck. Neither of them can be trusted with a group brain cell. So thank God April is there. These 2 idiots wouldn't survive without her. Beyond that, though, April's a pretty reserved person. Like a flame, she's elusive but beautiful. She radiates warmth, yet rarely does she let others get near her. She has her reasons for this, of course, but that is for the future. As the story goes on, especially within the first few seasons, April finds herself getting attached to these 2 dumbasses. Sure, they can get themselves into a lot of trouble, but they also help her out when she needs it. She finds herself going out more, wearing her disguise less, and as they grow closer, she grows to appreciate Daniel's unwavering loyalty and Kat's crazy ventures. This is also where I get to talk about some of the more domestic stuff in the story, especially within the first 2 seasons. It's very much a bit of a slice of life urban fantasy in the first 2. Mixed in with, like, some plot and some escalation and tension. One of the main domestic plus points is the band. I mentioned in the first video in this series that Kat turned the garage into a band practice room, but I don't actually think I mentioned who was in it. Daniel plays the drums, Kat the guitar, and April plays either the bass or the keyboard. depending on the song they're doing. I think she does prefer the keyboard though, it just seems to fit her more. And speaking of fitting, if I were more musically inclined, these would also be the instruments associated with each character. Individually, they make up the trio's themes. Individually, they would be the main instrument in the trio's themes, but when they all come together, work together to solve a problem, or like, I don't know, fight off a bad guy, all the instruments would come together to create the theme of the show. Sadly, I can't make good music to save my life, so it's only a side note for now. Something to think about if I do ever get this turned into a series. Story-wise, having them be in a band facilitates a lot of opportunities for crazy adventures or plot points that could occur. They could be out doing a gig, practicing somewhere, etc. It allows them to go out and actually interact with the world and have something to do. There would probably be at least one episode that the main conflict or whatever is around setting up the band and who plays what. And then throughout the season there'd be a few episodes where whatever's happening in the plot happens because they are doing band stuff. April's originally from the realm of magic, but ran away to the material world after some incident. From what Kat and Daniel can gather, she's had it rough and she's worked hard to get where she is today. It must have been bad because she doesn't want to talk about it, but they never push. That, however, changes one day when her brother comes back into the picture by sheer coincidence and demands to know where she's been. Speaking of, let's actually move on to him, shall we? Sunny is a nickname April gave to her brother, Summerson, when they were kids, and it very quickly stuck. Sunny is a winter fairy, and I actually posted his design on my Tumblr a while back, or at least some concept for his design, to help get some feedback with what he feels like as a character design. He is one of the reasons why this video is so late, but a lot of that feedback helped me, and I think my favorite was my friend's response where they said, and I quote here, "If I fell through the ice, he'd be the first guy to rescue me, even though we've never talked before, but as soon as he knew I was okay, he would be lecturing me about how unsafe that was, be walking around, and I didn't check first, and don't you know the local university monitors the ice thickness of the lake, and you can check on their website to see if it's safe." And I mean, yeah, that conveyed a lot of the vibe of the character perfectly, honestly. Maybe a bit more sporty than that, definitely. As you can see, he's got hockey skates on. Definitely, he has Big Brother vibes, essentially. I also really wanted him to look good when, drawn with April, so there is a lot of contrast between the two. Where April has wings that curl like fallen leaves, Sunny has these sharp geometric wings that kind of look like ice shards. With that as a starting point, I developed a pattern and I decided to keep it up for the whole family. And that ended up being the basis for April's rework. Since April has a more autumnal color palette and Sunny has a more wintry one, my mind went to the seasons. What if fairies and the rest of the magical realm by extension were divided up into seasonal categories or kingdoms? Since April was associated with fire and Sunny with ice, what if each season was also associated with an element? And since I already had fall and winter, I just have to have all four siblings be seasonal themes. I have to have the whole collection. You can't just have two of them and not have the other two. That idea was a stronger concept than previous story ideas for April. She is now the only sister of 4 siblings. For the summer-based sibling, I decided to make a hot mess of a dude named Douglas, or Doug for short. And then for spring, we have Augustus, or Gus, who's the baby of the family. I might draw Doug and Gus in the future, but I really don't want this video to be longer than it has to be. It's already taken a month or two, man. You may have also noticed that their names are references to the opposite of each season that's associated with them. It wasn't really intentional at first, but I decided to make it so because, I thought it was just funny little joke. Oh, they're the opposite. It's silly. They should, swap names. And then my brain went, and that implies that maybe their parents had high expectations of their children, and maybe none of those children turned out like the parent wanted. Huh. I wonder if those sorts of expectations could cause any issues or drive anyone to run away. So I decided to run with it, because my ADHD cannot be stopped. So in the end, their mother had very high expectations of her children, and none of them really fit into her idealized picture of what she thought they should be. April really tried hard to, being like the only girl in the family, but when her skill with fire emerged instead of plant or healing magic, her mother was disappointed with her, and that stung. Still, she did her best to impress her mother with the magic she did have. She got really good at it, and eventually accepted a chance to learn with one of the most respected fire mages in the realm. So, when April felt she failed at it, at her teaching and her schooling, she couldn't face her mother again. She couldn't face anyone in her family. Her shame swallowed her whole. Instead of going home, she ran. And she ran to the material world. Of course, Sunny didn't know about any of that. He knew that she was going off to learn, but he didn't know where she went afterwards. He'd been worried sick for his sister, looking for her ever since they realized she was missing. They used to be super close, but then she just vanished. He was terrified. He thought she might be dead. So when he sees her, by complete coincidence, yeah, he's stunned and he's worried and he's so happy that she's alive. Sunny wants to know everything that happened while she was gone. Why didn't she come home? What happened to her? Where has she been? But to explain that, we gotta introduce another character who's important to April's backstory. This character is the other reason this video was so late. When I talked about Celine, I implied that April also had connections to her. Celine helped April in a time of need. Well, time to expand on that. When April first came to the material realm, she was homeless. She was sleeping on the street and having a very rough time of it. She was not in a good place. Finally, one night, she went to what was rumored to be a monster-friendly bar just to find a little bit of safety and comfort. There, she found Celine, who listened to her plight. A lot of homeless shelters would refuse monsters outright, especially if they could tell it was a monster, and that left many monsters stranded. Celine, knowing this, gave April 2 gifts. Firstly, the glamour spell on the hairband so April could blend in with humans. Secondly, she connected her to Spencer. Spencer, as you can see, is a werewolf. He and his wife run one of the few monster-friendly homeless shelters in the city. It's almost always full, but Celine managed to get April a bed. From there, Spencer tried to connect with April, figure out what was going on and what April's deal was. It took a while, but slowly April opened up to him. He found out that she was a baker and ended up actually employing her in the homeless shelter itself as a cook. It wasn't much money, but it was enough experience that April managed to land another job elsewhere, and slowly she started to pull herself out of the pit of depression she found herself in. Werewolves have been around for a long time. I'm thinking it's more of a monster/supernatural race instead of condition that turns you monstrous, so no lycanthrope. That's just a fearful rumor that gets mixed up with vampirism. Werewolves can pass as humans if they want to, but they also have an animalistic form they can transform into. How animalistic the form is depends on the phase of the moon. The one you can see me drawing now is what I like to call the furry face. Lovingly, of course. I love you furries in the audience. This is during a waxing gibbous where like 3/4 of the moon is visible. Wolves are the most common, but there are other, quote, like werewolves that aren't exactly wolves, so you can be another type of animal. Despite this, regardless of whatever animal you are, your transformations are still linked by the phase of the moon, hence still being werewolves, technically. This technically has something to do with the magic realm, but the real history has been lost, overtaken instead with myths and legends of wild and dangerous men with no control over themselves, even though that's not exactly what a werewolf is. Spencer here is designed to be fairly innocuous. He passes as a normal human at first glance, and he tends to use that to his benefit. Not in a malicious way, just it's easier to get displaced monsters help if people assume he's just an average guy. but he's not lying about who he is to the people he's close to. April and Spencer are still close even after April got herself a job and an apartment. She still comes down and volunteers when she can. The shelter is usually understaffed, and she's used to running the kitchens anyways. It's a way for her to give back to the community, and maybe give back to Spencer in a way she doesn't think she can. I've had the idea that April has been homeless at some point in my head for a while. I think homelessness is an underrepresented issue, and it's easy for some people to forget that people without a home are still people. They still deserve kindness and a decent place to sleep, that they are still worthy of existing just like anyone else. They shouldn't be persecuted or locked up just because of their circumstance. Life is hard. We don't exactly know how everyone got where they are. Another reason I decided to have April be homeless, and this one's more story-oriented, is that it gives her some experience with addiction and cycles of destruction. If you saw my last video on Daniel, you probably know this would come in handy when dealing with a certain arc of his. And while April isn't a therapist by any means, she can't exactly fix him, having some experience is better than none. She'll at least be able to recognize what's happening. Also, I don't know where else to put this, but I just wanted to say, the reason I chose the name Spencer is because Spencer sounds like shelter to me, and I just... Look, I'm terrible at naming things, cut me some slack here, okay? Now with that out of the way, I'd like to move on to something completely unrelated and a little more lighthearted. Everyone, say hello to Valentine. And this is the part of the video where I take a break from all the backstory and angst and talk about shipping and world building for a while. So meet Valentine, the vampire. I came up with design for this character first, and I loved it so much I just had to add her, you know? Valentine is another student at the college Kat is attending. Within the first season, Kat meets her, gets suspicious of her, and eventually stumbles on Valentine drinking blood. And then kind of freaks out. Now, don't judge Kat too harshly here. There's a lot of rumors and stories about vampires. Some think that the smell of blood drives vampires into a bloodlust. Some say that they steal the youth from their victims. Others believe that looking into the eyes of a vampire can hypnotize you. And some think vampirism is hot because of various vampire romance novels. But as Kat learns from Valentine, vampirism isn't like any of those. Vampirism is a monstrous condition that means the vampire needs to consume human blood to live. And it does have to be for a person. No artificial substitutes or animal blood. There's a few other side effects, but there's a lot of downsides too. Like you're not immune to blood diseases or STDs. And finding a donor can be hard because of that. Because of the difficulty of securing blood from a safe source, many vampires turn to blood drives, hospitals, or independent companies. But hospitals need the blood for patients, blood drives often don't have enough to spare, and the companies, they often thin the human blood with animal blood. Then, they hike up the prices on the pure shit, which slowly starves the vampires who can't pay for it. They're literally draining the vampires dry in a cruel twist of fate. And if this is starting to sound like a metaphor for something, yeah, I'm not being subtle with this one. You can figure out on your own what this is a metaphor for. I'll give you a clue though. Just like in real life, there are two types of vampirism. The first is genetic, with very little research done into it. These are the born vampires, and their vampirism usually shows up when they're young. Then there's the second type, the turned vamps. But you don't just turn into a vampire randomly. Turning can be from a curse, interacting with unstable magic, or drinking a vampire's blood. Technically, this can happen at any age, but it typically appears later in life. Valentine here is a born vamp, dealing with vampirism since she was a child. Because this is one part of the world building I want to explore, I needed a reason for her to stick around for multiple episodes, multiple seasons. So, because Kat was the first one to meet her, Kat now has a girlfriend. You might be wondering, oh wait, shouldn't she be in Kat's video then? And I mean, yeah, fair point. But hear me out, okay? Hear me out. Kat and Valentine might be dating, but it's April that is affected by it. Because April, who's been living with Kat for a while now, starts to find herself jealous of Valentine. She wonders if it's just because Valentine's around more, or maybe it's because Kat is around less often. Regardless, this jealousy is what causes April to realize she's got a big old gay crush on Kat. April doesn't confess right away, or do anything stupid to try and break them up. Instead, she just tries to bury her feelings and force them to go away. Repression is an unfortunate habit of hers. Even after Kat and Valentine agree they're better off as friends and Kat's single again, April says nothing. She doubts Kat could ever return her feelings, and so what would be the point of confessing? And, it would have stayed that way, neither making a move, if it weren't for Valentine. She's very good with feelings, and so she obviously noticed April has a thing for Kat and is just trying to be polite and not say anything. But since breaking up with Kat, she's realized Kat also has a huge crush on April, and just does not realize it yet. Realizing these two idiots are planning to just pine at each other from a distance forever, and realizing that's going to be unbearable to be around, she decides somebody has to play matchmaker. And who better than Valentine herself? Each of the three main characters in the series has a villain, and we end off with those villains for these videos. For Kat, it was the Sun Dragon. For Daniel, it was the Mushroom Demon. And for April, it's another character I don't have a name for yet. Look. I'm great at making villains, okay? But naming them is Anyways, ignoring that, for this Fire Lady, she's based off a drawing I did for an Inktober 2022 challenge. The prompt was flame, I believe, and as I was watching a lot of Subjectively at the time, I wanted to make a, humanoid character design. This was the first time I really rendered fire in a way that I liked, and this design was just, so striking to me. It, stuck in my brain. So, like with Valentine, I ended up adding this Fire Lady to the universe. Alright, time to talk about the magic realm a bit more. Because this lady brought up a lot of questions about it. What kind of creature is she? Where did she come from? What kind of creatures are even in the magical realm? To answer a few of those questions, it's time for me to dump some exposition on you, so just hang tight. The magic realm was originally made to explain why immortal bodies healed after they died. Again, this was all based on Daniel, this whole world, and then later got expanded. An immortal soul traveling through the magic realm healed their bodies. Then it was expanded upon as a mix of the material realm and the spirit realm, which then is what makes magic in the first place. It's the intangible and the tangible colliding. While I was originally coming up with this concept, I was also reading up on some Celtic myths. With April as a fairy, I knew I wanted to include the fair folk in this world somehow. In the end, I decided that a lot of the humanoid races in the magic realm were originally humans who stumbled their way in accidentally. The children who were born in the magic realm adapted to fit it, with wings or tails or other oddities. Those children then had a deeper connection to magic, as they were shaped by the realm where magic originated from. If you've ever seen The Space Between Us, the movie with the kid who was born on Mars falling in love with somebody on Earth, it's kind of similar to that concept, just with, magic instead of science, But this lady is clearly based on kitsune from Japanese folklore, not Celtic at all. So, what's going on here? Well, the explanation is a bit lame, to be honest. I'm mixing mythologies. Stories and myths are just that. Stories and myths, even in this world. The magic realm holds a lot of the supernatural creatures, and they can appear all over the world. Sometime in the past, someone had an encounter with one of these races, and then they went on to tell their friend, and those friends told their friend, and the story got taller and taller. Mythology is just a really old game of telephone in this world. Eventually, those humanoid races became established within the magic realm and kind of made their own cultures in different areas. Nowadays, they call themselves the Fae as a collective word for anyone originating from the realm of magic. Yet, this doesn't mean that they're all from the same mythos, nor are they all the same kind of creatures. There are subcategories of Fae races, and of course there's some mixing there too. Elves, dwarves, changelings, any kind of yokai you can think of, they all exist, and there's a variety of cultures within each. I don't have time to go through each one right now, so let's just focus on the fiery lady for now. She is what we would call a kitsune, a shape-shifting fox creature. She lives in the Winter Kingdom of the Magic Realm and is one of the most respected fire mages. Kitsune's transformations come from the shifting of the flame, the magic of illusion. Of course, not all kitsune are tricksters, that's just on her, but their existence is tied to the magic of fire. Kind of like werewolves in the moon. Could be some lore there. April went to train under this fire lady for some time. During this time, bad things happened. After a while, April ran away and hoped she would never see the Winter Kingdom again. But then the road trip arc comes. It's a tour of all the major cities in each season in the Magic Realm. April will have to face her past again. Both the good parts with her family and brothers, but also the bad parts too. This villain also mimics April's flame motif, and for good reason. Because April sees this woman as who she should be. This is the standard April feels like she doesn't fit into. Doesn't feel like she can live up to, both in ability but also in beauty. A question I like to ask myself when creating villains is, what would defeating this villain mean to the hero? That's something to think on with this. And that's the end of this set of designs. Wow, I've written like 42 pages of character information, and I still haven't gotten through everything I wanted to talk about. Look, I know I said this would be a series of only like 3 videos, but maybe I should do a 4th about the extra stuff of the world? I've gotten some like good questions about the world and what kind of like format I want to use to tell this story in. I'd love to be able to answer them. I could talk about how society functions, even with all these changes. Or I could do some side plots, talk about how they go. Or I could talk about the actual plot and just spoil all the story right here and now. Let me know if you've got any questions or topics you want me to expound on further. Anything you ask lets me think about the complications of this world I've built, and it might even bring up points that I haven't thought about. And that's a good way to expand a world. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got to start on another animatic. Speaking of which, heads up if you're on the lookout for the next part of the Reporter AU. It's going to be a bit of an aside from the stuff going on with the main plot. Specifically, I'm exploring Angel in this AU, partially because I need to figure out what I'm doing with Alistair after the whole, has-been leaks happened. Oh, clarify, do not give me spoilers. I do not want them. I don't want to know nothing about it. I want to see the story as it unfolds. All I know so far is that he's got a new design, and I need to figure out if I'm keeping my design or changing it to the one that got revealed. But until then, I will see you all later, and I hope you all have a great day.